Hello, everybody.
Hello, beautiful people.
We're having a super chill day, having our cups of chai. We're super relaxed. The house is clean. It just rained for like 4 hours straight. So we're in a super chill state. And we said, let's connect with our soul family. And this video, you guys, is absolutely hands down not only one of my favorite topics because of how important it is in our ascension journey, but it's also a personal favorite because triggers are like ticking time bombs in us. And unless and until we learn what triggers really are, understand the mechanism behind them, learn how to de-trigger them, and move on with our lives, we really are ticking time bombs that can go off anytime. And because of this, we're causing a lot of havoc in our lives because we have all these triggers popping up from left, right, and center. Yeah. So this video, we've been told, I was literally shown your egos are going to try to offer resistance, put up resistance and saying, this is not important. I'm good at all this shit. I'm really good at this. This is nothing. This is not important. This is not important for my spirituality. So don't let your ego, don't fall for your ego. Why does your ego do this for triggers? Let's talk about that for a second. Your ego loves to keep you in a state of panic, a small state away from your divinity. This is how important triggers, like de-triggering your triggers is. Like literally once you debunk your triggers and de-trigger your triggers, a lot of triggers in these videos, triggers. Anyway, once you do all of that, you free yourself once and for all. I repeat, you free yourself. So knowing what you can't heal these triggers until you understand the mechanism of these triggers. Literally, you can't understand. Do you want to say anything before we?
Yeah, although we've spoken about triggers in many videos in the past, this is one of the areas of expertise. And not only that, like Eldora mentioned, this is where the actual work lies. If you think that meditation, that spirituality and evolution is all about meditating or eating superfoods or doing yoga and Pilates and dressing a certain way, that's fine. But when people ask us what is the sure shot fastest way to get past all my blocks, that would be this video. The content that we're going to cover here is the most important part of your spiritual evolution. So do take this very seriously if you are serious about your spiritual growth. And also I wanted to mention that our intention for this particular video was to make this a reference point for triggers. So this is like your reference manual on how to fully understand and comprehend all angles of triggers, how they're caused, and how to reverse engineer the triggers so that they're no longer ruling over your life. So this is going to be a comprehensive video, and we're going to cover a lot of things that we've never covered before.
I'm super excited. Okay guys, so first of all, you guys know what a trigger is. When you're triggered by someone, you can either be triggered by someone in a small way, in a passive aggressive way, or you can just go bonkers, you can go nuts and you can have a crazy reaction. And these triggers usually come out of nowhere. So everyone kind of know what the word trigger refers to. Like, I'm triggered, you say that loosely, right? Let's talk about what a trigger is. Now, think of your physical body. When you fall down and you get a wound, you get a hurt on your body, that becomes a physical wound, correct? You take a band-aid and you put it on your physical wound because the band-aid is just a little cover. It's a protective mechanism. It's a protective cover for your physical wound. You're with me so far? Now, a trigger is a similar band-aid placed on your emotional wounds. So let's redefine that. A trigger is a coping mechanism or a protective mechanism that is placed on your wounds. I wrote this down actually. I actually channeled an exact definition. Let me read it out. Where is it? A trigger is a coping and a protection mechanism that you place on your wounds to avoid the wound to be looked at, which in turn causes an intense and rapid emotional reaction within you. It sets off a flight or fight response, a nervous system response, and anything can trigger it. So today we're going to talk about how these triggers keep us stuck, keep us in playing small and in timelines that are not our highest joy, not our highest bliss. These triggers, literally think of them as ticking time bombs, and that's how you know how important these are to de-trigger.
And just to be clear on what we're talking about here, you know those times when you're somebody says something to you and you're just jolted and you're no longer in your normal state that you were in like 30 seconds ago, and you're suddenly in this emotional state of like negative state of anger or intense emotional reaction.
It could even be fear, panic,
Yeah, it could
rage,
be anything.
resentment.
Yeah, it's all these negative emotions, but the hallmark of a trigger is that the emotion completely takes over you like a guard dog, and it tries to like push away other people from you because it's like a defense mechanism. So it's very important to know the vibration of the trigger so you know what we're talking about here.
Let's go into an example. I have a few examples, but we'll just flow with whatever example pops up. So I have two really good examples. I'll start with one and I'll give the other one later. At the retreat that we recently held, there was a day I remember when all the guests were downstairs. I was upstairs, I was processing some intense energies, so I was guided to go up there and stretch, remember? Yeah. Stretch, and I was doing all kinds of things, Kundalini activations and stuff, and I was all by myself. Siman was there, and we were setting up for our students. We were setting up for the retreat attendees. And there was one beautiful girl who very quietly tiptoed up, and I saw her making like 20 trips up the stairs with yoga blocks that we had used the previous day. Actually, they had gone for beach yoga. So they had all these beach yoga, like all these yoga mats and blocks and all of that stuff. She single-handedly came up, she made 20 trips, and she's a skinny girl. And I, even though I didn't engage with her because I was going through my own process there, I was stretching, I didn't want to speak to anyone, I didn't want to be disturbed, and she was very respectful of that, which I kept thinking, how sweet, she's so respectful. She's not even saying hello, Eldora, to disturb what I'm going through. So anyway, she came, she left all of that, and that night we had a bonfire. And at the bonfire, I very lovingly went up to her and I said, why did you have to do all of that yourself? Like, you came up 20 times. I literally saw that. And her face just shrunk, completely shrunk. And I had no idea why. I'm like, am I seeing this right in the moonlight? Her face changed, everything changed, her demeanor changed. And she says, well, you were alone, and she tried to say something, but her voice wasn't clear. And I said, yeah, like let everybody do their own maths. Why are you helping everybody? Just let everyone do their own maths. It's too much for you. Now, and then we forgot about it, but her mannerism towards me completely changed. The next day, all day, she was very withdrawn from me. The first 2 days, she was actually very like bubbly and close to me and constantly talking to me. And then by the third day after this, she completely withdrew from me. Now, that was the same day, the day she withdrew, that was the same day I had a huge breakthrough at the retreat where I realized I was putting up all these walls because I was not ready to drop my walls to accept love from anyone other than him. Like his love was safe to me, but when everyone else started showering me with love, I started putting up walls. So anyway, long story short, I had a breakthrough and I had an emotional release. Like I cried and I purged, and it was very, very powerful, very deep, because it felt like I was purging for the collective as well, and everyone was witness to that. Right after that, the same girl came to me crying, bawling, and she says, I was only trying to help. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? And she says, yesterday, the yoga blocks, I was only you, didn't want to be disturbed. And I said, I don't understand what you're saying. I literally didn't know what she was talking about. And then she explained to me that, Eldora, I could sense that you wanted your privacy. And so I came up to the yoga shala like 20 times. I didn't want everybody's energies to bother you and everyone to come up and start talking and shouting and screaming. So what I did was I made sure I quietly came up and dropped every single yoga mat and block and everything myself. And she said, then you scolded me at the bonfire. She said, it was very endearing actually. She said, and then when you said to me, why do you have to do these things? That's how she heard it. Why do you have to do these things? Don't you, she took it as if I was scolding her for doing that. And she says, I realize now that that's my mother's voice. And so when I had my emotional breakthrough, she was there and her heart melted and she's like, something's off. And I said, no, that's actually the opposite of what I was trying to tell you. I was trying to say to you, I was like, why is this sweet girl making 20 trips? I'm sure everyone at the retreat was super amazing. Like everyone would do their own blocks. But you see how she was doing it in her love for me. But because she has such a big gaping wound, someone's at the door. Hold on, we'll be. Because she has such a big gaping wound in her heart, she has this big gaping wound that says, I'm not loved. I was never loved by my mother. Okay, so she had this big wound in her heart saying, I'm not loved. My mother talks down to me. And this trigger was just put in front of her wound, and the trigger said, no one's going there, this is too painful. Because the wound happened in her childhood, and the wound got bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And what a trigger does is it protects the wound. And it protects the wound, it says, no one's going in here. And what a trigger does is, instead of letting you see things for what it is, it says, you know what, when this wound was developed, I was too young to even process it. I was too young to even handle it. I was not even spiritually and emotionally mature. I was such a little person. So what your ego does is your ego says, I'm putting this fail-safe lock on it, this mechanism on it, this vault on it. No one goes there.
Exactly.
And right now, you guys, your triggers are not needed because you're all adults. You are ready to heal this once and for all. Your triggers, their work is done.
And everybody on earth has triggers. So the biggest piece of advice we can give to anyone who says, I don't have any triggers, I would say get in a relationship. Because when we're dealing with our parents, when we're dealing with our spouses, with our children, there are going to be triggers. If you live alone on an island, I think you'll be pretty safe. So what happens is when we're young, I'll take this example and dive a bit deeper into the psyche of what takes place. When we're younger, and let's say we are feeling negative emotions from our parents, like let's say your mother spoke down to you, or your father was like a very emotionally abusive, always put you down. What happens is the pain of that experience is so unbearable for the child that they simply are unable to process it, because the parents are their safety net, right? If a child doesn't have a safety net, the pain almost feels like unbearable to the point that I don't want to process this. I don't want to be on planet Earth anymore because I don't feel safe here. If my own parents are not safe for me, then what value do I have as a life? So not only do you feel unsafe, but you also start to develop aspects of feeling insecure about yourself. You feel like I'm not good enough. You feel like I'm a bad person. And suddenly a sub-personality begins to develop out of these beliefs that you've taken on from outside, which are not even yours. You're always a pure soul within. What happens is a layer of a veil of separation develops around you that separates your divine, original, pure, beautiful, angelic source self from the outside world. And that becomes your ego. So your ego is like an artificial sub-personality that has formed from all of your life experiences. So your trauma from your childhood is a part of your ego. Your first affair in high school is part of your ego. So all of these things become part of your personality, and you begin to identify with the ego, because in this world, everybody is their ego. Very few people have reached their pure, infinite soul state. So because all these egos are now interacting with each other in society, we all think we are the ego. So whenever somebody talks down to you in the future, your ego suddenly takes over and you say, why are you talking down to me? But you know what the interesting thing is? When you're usually triggered, it is not that the other person is talking down to you or trying to be mean to you. Like Eldora, she was just asking out of love. She was asking this beautiful girl, why did you have to do all this work yourself? But what it translated to
if
that
he did
girl,
that, I would whip his ass. I'd say, why are you taking 20 people's fucking mats? Like,
exactly.
let
She
them
was
do it
speaking out
themselves.
of love.
Yeah.
But how it translates to the person being triggered, because that girl had a trigger of her mother never appreciating her for the efforts that she puts forth and never acknowledging her efforts, all the sweet things she did for her mother. Maybe she wrote her mother a beautiful Mother's Day card when she was 6 and her mother didn't acknowledge her. That could become a wound. So how Eldora's very loving reaction was translated was completely opposite of what it was. It was like, why did you do this? That's how it translated. And suddenly the trigger takes over. So why does this happen? It's because your subconscious mind is trying to constantly, at the right opportunity, creating a situation that's completely illusory. It's not even real. And it's trying to help you remember, hey, listen, you still have this wound. You still haven't looked at this. So I'm going to create this situation, even though it's maybe a completely bogus story, but it's going to remind you what you still have not looked at.
And the ego tries to protect the inner child's experience. That's what's happening right now. But right now, this protection is not needed anymore. A trigger is a distraction that's distracting you from opening a wound that hasn't healed yet. You're being distracted to look over there, like look there, look there, look there, so you don't have to look here, 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 and here being the wound and there being the distraction. In other words, without unhealed wounds, you really have no triggers. Once you heal your wounds, you let go of all your triggers. Triggers are keeping you from getting access to the unhealed wound. Very important to understand this. The trigger is keeping you from getting access to the unhealed wound. The trigger is put into place as a protective mechanism. This was needed when you were first wounded, but now it's not protecting you anymore. They're actually keeping you from healing the very core wounds that are right behind the trigger. It keeps you too distracted to even start the healing. It keeps you in anger, in rage, in sadness. The unhealed wound needs healing.
Now, it's also important to note here that triggers are not always caused by somebody else from or a second person that's in your life. Sometimes you could be all alone on yourself. For example, you could be doing the dishes all alone in the house, and you have the radio playing, and suddenly a song comes on that reminds you of your old boyfriend that you broke up with 2 years ago, but you still haven't processed all the pain of that breakup. Like you still have unresolved feelings. So it's very natural for you to suddenly fall into grief and sadness because all of these old memories are evoked, right? So that's another kind of trigger, which was not really caused by outside. It was caused from just you being by yourself. But the one common thing that all triggers rely on is that all triggers are related to an incident that caused an emotional reaction in the past that still remains unprocessed.
And mainly from your childhood. You can say 80% of these triggers are from your childhood, but there are also the odd time when these triggers are formed in your adult life when the pain was just way too much.
Yeah, and an example of adult life trigger could be you getting into a 4-car crash. For example, God forbid, everybody stay safe. But let's say somebody gets into an accident and they are injured from that accident, and now they have a physical wound from that accident. Maybe they were in a cast for like 3 months or 6 months. So all of that pain also becomes like emotional pain, right? Because it's such a painful experience. Your physical body is not separate from your emotional body. All your bodies feel that trauma. So now your trauma is lodged in that emotional body. Now it's become a wound on its own. So there's a physical wound, then there's an emotional wound, because the physical experience of that accident was so shocking. It could have been that you had a near-death experience. It could have been so shocking that you were not able to fully process it, and you need time to process it. So let's say you just got out of your cast and you're healing now, and you're happily driving with your husband, and suddenly your husband starts speeding, and suddenly there's a car in front of him and he needs to brake. So you were caught in this situation again where you're almost in an accident. So instead of having a normal reaction, which would be, thank God we're safe, we're okay, let's move past this, you would lash out at your husband, right? You would say, oh my God, you're such an idiot, what the hell, you have no concern for my life. You would just say everything that rolls off the top of your tongue, and it's in a very hurtful way to the other person, because it's your ego, it's that guard dog that takes over. So this is an example of triggers from your adulthood, but sometimes triggers can also be cause you to go withdrawn. They can
Well, actually,
also,
I have a really good example about not withdrawn. I have a really good example about the childhood triggers.
Sure.
So until a few years ago, I had this huge trigger on my birthday. Every single, and many of you know this because I made a post about it when I healed it.
That's a good example.
I think 2 Novembers ago. So my birthday is in November, and every single November, ever since I met Siman, all of this never happened before I met Siman because I was never in a safe place. All the healing came up since our meeting. So every single birthday, something would happen to me. Literally, it felt like something would take over me, and I would have this so first of all, right now I'm in a totally different situation. I don't even care about birthdays. My life is so fulfilling. I don't care about birthdays, Valentine's Days. We don't celebrate our birthdays anymore, not either of ours. But back then the wound, the trigger was so high that on my birthday every year we would get into a massive fight because my inner child completely came out and literally dominated and took over and said, that's it, that's the gift you bought me? Oh my God, why did you buy me a gift? Like if he bought me a gift, it would be, why did you buy me a gift? If he didn't buy me a gift, it would be like, why didn't you buy me a gift? For lack of a better term, I was like the most sane, responsible, calm person throughout the year. And on my birthday, every year like clockwork, we would fight like cats and dogs because we didn't even know or understand why the hell I was acting like all of this. Like we didn't even realize it was a trigger until the 3rd year when we healed it. This was 2 years ago. How it healed was I realized, oh my God, this wound is because my birthday was the only day in which I received love from my parents. They made me feel special. They didn't shout at me. They didn't beat me. They said, happy birthday. And that was the maximum love I got that was the most love I got from them in my childhood. So I waited for my birthday every year. And somehow on that particular day, it's because that was the only day, I don't even what happened on my birthday. That was the only day I craved love, or it was crazy.
Eldora had a very tough childhood, and I thought I had a tough childhood till I heard her stories. So basically the scenario was that both parents were not very loving. The mother was being abused by the father, and the father was very narcissistic, controlling type. So the mother didn't have a connection with her, and her father was very controlling. He was loving in a very controlling, narcissistic way. So Eldora as a child felt very isolated. She felt like she didn't receive any love. So the one day of the year that she did receive love was on her birthday.
Right.
So when her birthday arrives, she is like on ninth heaven, right? She's over the moon. She just wants to soak it all up, and that becomes like
a sub-personality.
It becomes a saboteur. It becomes like something that takes over for the hurt that you feel the 364 days of the year. This one day, I'm the one that everybody showers their love on, and they're not allowed to hurt me. So,
and I would start testing you.
Yeah.
Saying, let me see if he loves me enough or he's gonna hurt me.
Yeah. So when we met, we were giddy, we were in love. But after a couple of years, and this is what happens in normal relationships. Like usually the first 2 years are the honeymoon phase, and then when you really start to feel safe with the other person, that's when you allow your inner child to come out. So if you're in a relationship where you're having these kind of issues, know that they're only coming up because you're in love with each other and you feel safe to heal this problem now. So don't think of it at, oh my God, we need to break up, there's too many problems. Think of it as, oh my God, this is the real work. We need to roll up our sleeves and dive deeper. Because when we know what to focus on, then we can heal it. So in our situation, on the birthday, when I was giving her a gift or I was giving her a surprise, her reaction would be, oh my God, no, this is too much. Like, why did you do this? I don't even like this. Like, ego would make all kinds of stories to say, I don't deserve this. I don't want this. You're doing something wrong, because it's saying, I haven't received love. That's the wound. So it's saying, there's no way I can receive love from you because I am unable to love myself. That's the core wound. Because our parents didn't fulfill our need at a young age for the love that forms the foundation of our whole personality, that's huge. It's the love that we receive in childhood. I'm going to repeat that because this is important. The love that we receive in our childhood is the most important part that forms the foundation of our entire personality. So when we are starved of that love, we don't even know how to love ourselves. So when we don't know how to love ourselves, how can we receive gifts from others? So when Eldora and I experienced unconditional love towards each other for the first time, her ego story came up like, oh my God, this is too much for me. Remember, we even said this in the last video, that if you haven't resolved all of your wounds and all of your intimacy blocks, then how can you receive love from someone else? So it's the same scenario here.
That was very beautifully explained. Because what happened on my birthday, I mean, it's a few years ago, but that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So the good news is once you heal the wound, the trigger is gone. So now my birthday is amazing. We travel the world and we don't really celebrate it because every day is a celebration.
Every day is our birthday.
Every day is a celebration day. So once you heal the wound, the trigger goes away. So you stop acting like someone throwing a temper tantrum. You stop internalizing things. You stop going off on these crazy tangents. Now, the next segment of this video, which I'd like to segue into, is how to heal these triggers once and for all. Now, before we go in there, I'd like to say that the wound is like a cancer cell that draws life force energy. I'll say that in a different way. These wounds that are in us are just like a cancer cell. What does a cancer cell do? A cancer cell sucks out chi energy from the surrounding cells and it kills all the cells around it for it to thrive, and it takes up a lot of energy. These wounds are the same way. They take up a lot of energy, which is why you may be feeling exhausted, drained. All these wounds are still there. Wounds, like you have to heal these wounds. The bigger the wound, the bigger the trigger in place. The bigger the wound, the more energy it takes. So this is super important. If you have all these huge wounds, you're literally, it's sucking out your life force energy, you guys.
Yeah.
And the next segment we're going to go into, once you're explain that a bit more, and then we'll go into how to heal it.
Yeah, I can go into my own example because I had huge wounds from my own childhood. And I also want to shed light on this topic from a different angle, from the angle of men. Women are very in touch with their emotions, but for men, it takes like days sometimes to even recognize what emotions we're feeling. So my childhood wounds originated from my father speaking down to me, and any level of disrespect I experienced in my life thereafter, I would blow it out of proportion. So I would turn a molehill into a mountain. So basically, in our relationship, we have the most loving relationship I know of personally, and you guys are well aware of that. But the ego always creates an illusion in a story. So sometimes, like for example, if I'm giving Eldora a massage, and she just jokingly jabs at me and says, you know, you used to give such good massages when we were dating, and your quality has really degraded. As a normal person, like who's fully healed, what would I say?
Like
I would
now,
say,
what would you say?
Hey, get out of here! Like you little brat, you spoiled brat.
No, you would say, you spoiled brat. Fine, I'll massage you now.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Or whatever, right? But my wound came up from my childhood of not being appreciated, and from my ex-marriage of not being appreciated and doing all these sweet things. And so we all carry these wounds. So what I did instead was like just stop the massage and say, you know what, you're not in gratitude, I'm not going to give you this massage anymore. So my ego made up the story that she's the bad one, she's in ungratitude, and I'm mad at her.
And I remember this was like 6 years ago. This was when we first met. I literally remember we were still in our first apartment. I remember he stopped massaging me. Like we were in complete joy, bliss, and love. This is how triggers work. And when I said that, I'm like, hey, what the hell's happening to your massage? Like, do a better job. Like, remember in our dating days, I was just yapping. Like, we're always yapping with each other. But because his trigger took over, he stopped massaging me. And I'm thinking, where did those hands go? Like, I'm like lying down. Where did those hands go?
She was in a different world. I'm in a different world.
He goes around the side of the bed and he lies down. And I said, what happened? He says, so basically his story was the ungratitude. And that's when you realize all these triggers are meant to be healed, because ungratitude is not a lesson that I need to heal or he needs to heal.
So when you really look at the story in that moment, you have to ask yourself, hey, I'm with the most loving woman I've ever met. Am I really believing the story that she's in ungratitude? or maybe I'm misinterpreting it. And when you start to decode, you'll always uncover the layers. And before we move on to how to deal with triggers, I also wanted to touch on the fact that for men, sometimes it takes days for us to process our feelings and to know exactly what we're feeling. So in the initial part of our relationship, my relationship with Eldora, when I was going through my emotional healing, when I was triggered, sometimes I would just go into days of remission. Like I would spend 2 whole days like lying on a bed and just feeling my wounds. Now that's a good thing. You should feel your wounds, but I'm saying this to all the people who are in such relationships with men who are sensitive or men who are working through their stuff. When they go into remission, what they're actually doing is they're trying to figure out what's going on within. So give them time and hold space for them. And for the men who are actually going through this process, understand that there's a lot more going on inside that your mind will have you believe. So go deeper than your outward ego story of she hurt me or he hurt me or this is because of this. It's never the present situation. It's always a wound from your past. And this is what we're going to help you decode.
I love it. Perfect, guys. So let's segue into how to heal these damn triggers. Step number one, don't be hard on yourself for having all these triggers. I was the most sane, responsible, calm, loving person. But on my birthday, I turned into a crazy person. Like he would even be wondering, he's like, how did this girl morph into this?
Come on, you weren't that bad.
Baby, come on. You're just, I used to act like a lunatic.
But the thing is, because I see the stories, it wasn't that bad. Because I see her inner child.
Yeah, exactly. It's the inner child that's completely unhealed. So when you are triggered, whether you're in a fight with your partner or your mother or someone's triggering you, the first thing, of course, is when someone's triggering you, it's always about you. It's not about them. So if you're watching me on YouTube, you're watching him on YouTube and you're getting triggered, it's completely on you. We'll go into that next. Right now, I just want to get into how to heal the triggers. So step number one, when it's very important, when you are in a state of being triggered, this can be very, very hard to do, you guys. It can be very, very, very hard because your ego is literally trying to take control of you and saying, all right, I got it. I got you. It feels like your ego has just taken over.
It's a game of willpower.
Yes.
Yeah, so you really have to focus your mind that this time I'm going to not let my ego take over me and I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Correct. So when this happens, the first thing to do is don't go hard on yourself. Don't say, why am I like this? Why am I behaving like this? I'm such a nut job. I lose everything. I ruin every relationship. No. First say, hey, I'm human, I have wounds and I have triggers, and the fact that I now know what to do about these triggers is great news. I'm going to heal it. Step number 2, recall your power from the wound. Recall your energy from the wound. You can write this affirmation down. I no longer allow my wounds and triggers to control me. I recall my power from all directions and all epochs of time now. You can make these in any way you like, but basically what you're saying is I recall all the energy that's being sucked out of me. I recall all of this back to me now from all my lifetimes, from all parallel realities, from all dimensions, from all versions of me running right now in parallel realities. I recall this energy back to me now. And by doing that, what happens is you're cutting off the energy supply, the energy source to these wounds. You're recalling them. And what happens when you recall energy? You're not giving it energy to grow. So what makes it grow constantly? When you don't know it's a trigger and you're constantly in your story saying, oh, she hurt me, she spoke down to me, he did that, he bullied me, and you're always in this state of like, she was in ungratitude. You're always protecting those wounds. Now what you're doing is you're saying, no, I reclaim my power and I command my energy to return to me now from all these wounds that I have going on and from all epochs of time.
Another way to explain that is that because when we are unaware of the trigger and there are new situations in our life that are re-evoking that trigger and we're re-feeling all of those pain emotions that we didn't process in the past, If we continue to blame the outside circumstances, what are we doing? We're making that wound grow bigger and bigger, like a cancer, like a tumor. And it's gonna keep on growing, and it's gonna keep on sucking more and more energy out of you. So as a shaman, I see these all the time. When I'm giving healing to a person and I look into their light body, you can see a lot of pieces of their light body are just dark. So what happens is, because we have so many wounds that are attached to the past, to our childhood, and even beyond childhood, into our past lives, there are so many lives of trauma where we've left strands of our energy behind. So all of these strands of energy actually are pieces of our soul or fragments of our soul that we've left in other dimensions. So what we do as a shaman or as energy healers is, it's called soul retrieval. And the affirmation that Eldora just mentioned is similar to what we do in a soul retrieval, where we recall all strands of energy back from all past versions of ourselves, from our past life, from our childhood, from all previous versions, back into whole, into oneness. So just by saying this powerful affirmation, don't discount the fact that these are just simple words. You're giving the universe a command to recall all of this energy back towards you. And that's a very powerful thing.
And this stuff is real. This stuff is real. It's powerful.
It's real because we've experienced it firsthand.
We've healed our triggers, you guys, which is why we can be so close right now. If we had all these unhealed wounds, we could not activate our twin flame codes. And for us to activate our twin flame codes, that takes us on this crazy spiral that we are on right now. We're on a very rapid ascension spiral because we've healed our wounds. We've debunked all these triggers. We've decommissioned all our triggers. So we've set ourselves free. That is the foundation for the next step. Step number 3, and this is actually my favorite step. I have done it personally. This is how I know it. I was not taught this. I have done this myself, and it works like magic. The third step, which is the most powerful step, it is the hardest thing to do, but it requires willpower. Remember this. It requires willpower. It literally is like the ego is trying to take over you, and you're saying, no. You literally are like, literally, that's the energy that comes out of it. You're saying, no, I'm in control. It is the hardest thing to do, guys, and especially if the wound is big.
It feels like you're reversing a sinking ship.
Exactly. It takes so much mastery. That's what it is. It takes mastery and presence.
And persistence.
Correct. So this is what you do. Step number 3. You look past the trigger of, okay, I'm behaving like a lunatic right now. I'm having this crazy intense reaction. You look, or let's say you're with someone else and this person's having a crazy intense reaction. We learned that when we were going through our triggers, we learned how to hold space for each other by not blaming the person's reaction. But this is the tip: look past the trigger and get to the wound. I repeat, don't look at the trigger. The trigger is making you act erratic, is making you throw a temper tantrum, is making you fight, is making you leave the house, is making you yell at your wife or your husband or whatever. Or going into a sad state that Eldora spoke down to me, like my mother used to speak down to me, or whatever. Or the trigger could be that Eldora interrupts Siman on YouTube, or Siman interrupts Eldora, or whatever your stories are. These are all your triggers. If you're, we've said this before, if you're getting upset that someone's cutting someone off, you have to go back to your wound and say, when have I been cut off?
And that actually happened with one of the participants in our retreat who was triggered by Eldora cutting me off, and then she brought this up in the retreat, and we sat down and decoded it, because we told her, okay, it's not our problem because we're fine, you brought it up, so let's decode it. And we realized that it was in her childhood that she was always talked down to and told to shut up. So most people who are triggered by others cutting somebody else off, it's because you were cut off.
Yes, maybe your wife is cutting you off all the time. Maybe your mother is cutting you off all the time. When we talk, we're not cutting each other off. We are fully in sync. We are like that. So you understand, the trigger is about your wound. I have a brilliant example right now, and then Siman's going to go deep and decode it. We're going to talk about that incident. About 4 years ago, I sold my business in Toronto. And I remember I had 6 friends that I invited to the farewell party. I literally said, oh my God, it would mean the world to me if my 6 very best friends came to that farewell party. Like that night at midnight, I was handing over the keys, and it was a huge deal for me because that was one of my biggest 3D tethers. It's like leaving your corporate job after 30 years and then walking into your ascension. That's how big it was. So we had and then the employees were all giving me gifts and singing songs for me, and like it was just a very emotional night. And I remember one of my friends was sitting across of me. She was like my sister. Like I'm talking my sister. This is someone that felt truly like a sister to me. And she would always say to me that she would say, you know, I'm not happy with my husband. I'm going to cheat on him. And she would say, I'm going to go and have an affair with this guy, and show me pictures on her phone. And I said, listen, I've been there. I've been in a horrible marriage when I always thought that cheating on him would make something right. But listen, cheating is just a band-aid solution for what's deeper. So we had all those talks and everything. But that night, she said to us, we're going to have a baby. We're going to start trying to have a baby. Like we're going to start trying. We've set the intention to have a baby. And because of how loving and emotional and sentimental and nostalgic that night was, like literally 6 of my best friends at my final, it's my treat for selling my business. So you can imagine it's a very, very sacred night. I went up to her and I said, babe, can you please pause on the kids? And I said this to her one-on-one I pulled her aside and I said, can you just pause on the kids? You're not even happy with him. You're thinking of having an affair. Like, think about it. And I said, having a child is the last thing you should be doing right now. Like, think about it. That's what a good friend would say. That night, there was no reaction from her, except she said to him, she's like, Eldora thinks I shouldn't have a baby now. And he was very neutral. He's like, okay, like, I don't care. Like, have a baby, don't have a baby. It's not my concern. He had a very like, I don't give a shit attitude. And I remember the next day, okay, so we have no idea there's something wrong. We're completely normal. The next day, I received a message by text or Facebook. I can't remember. It was like, the devil, like it was literally like the devil was in her. She was calling me the devil. So anyway, she sent me a really long message saying, how dare you say that we shouldn't have kids? How dare you put such a curse on me? She went ballistic. And not only that, she emailed every single person who was at that dinner and said, you don't know, you've actually been very blind to the fact that Eldora is extremely dark. She's a devil. She's blah, 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 blah. She just went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And she wouldn't stop. She even made public posts on Facebook. She went erratic. Now, luckily, I don't give a shit because in those days I had just like fake friends. So there was a lot of drama around that and they all made me feel very great by supporting me. It's all fake anyway, but that's not the point. So this lady left our lives and then it hit me. It was shown to both Saman and me psychically that this is what happened to her. Her wound was that A, she didn't know how to survive without this guy paying her bills. They were miserable in their marriage, which is why she was always trying to, have an affair. She was trying to hook him with pregnancy and he'll pay my bills. Literally, that was the energy.
Yeah,
he'll pay my bills.
That psychically, actually.
Yeah. He's a loser. I can go have an affair and he won't even care. He's just going to be smoking weed all day, but he takes care of my bills. So I'm just going to have a kid to hook him into this relationship because I am not worthy of anything without him. And unless I have a child, he's going to leave me. She had all these stories playing around. That wound was so huge because her mom was like, whatever, it goes back. We're going to debunk it in a second, but it goes back so big that this wound was so big that the trigger took over. And instead of her taking control of her ego completely took over her and convinced her that I am the devil.
Yeah, so in this particular case, and I was very close to the situation. I was there and I knew this person and I knew her husband. So in this particular situation, when we were reflecting on the situation, like what caused this? Like we completely backed off. We didn't react, nothing, because it was not our trigger. We totally get it. Like you need to pay attention to something else, but you have the story and you're pinning it on us, but it has nothing to do with us. So as far as we're concerned, there's a relationship is over. I mean, we're fine, but the relationship was over from her end because she cut it off and there was no coming back from what.
And that's another thing, guys. When someone is triggered, don't try telling them, oh honey, you're triggered. Don't try telling them it's a wound. Leave them alone. Don't try coaching them.
We didn't try to debunk anything she said. We didn't try to like correct her. We just gave her space. And honestly, her messages were quite abusive. So
very abusive.
We were protecting ourselves from her negative energy too. But we actually went and reflected on the situation and asked our guides what actually happened. And then we had the aha moment that this lady was in a very sad marriage. Like, she was not happy, and her husband had certain behavioral patterns that were not very supportive of their relationship. He was an addict, and she was depending on him for income.
He was
like,
a dealer.
she was kind of a housewife, and she was like he was the bread earner, but they were not happy. So she had lived in this situation of codependency for so long that leaving the relationship is like completely no. It's like her ego would tell her, I'll be out on the street, like, I need this guy, right? And I kind of love him, he kind of listens to me, I can manipulate him. So this is how the ego plays. It's all a very manipulative game. So her having a baby was another way of manipulating him by putting an anchor or a hook in him that now you have to take care of me. Now I'm the mother of your child. Now, even if I get divorced, I can take away half your wealth or more, as the Western society has so elegantly engineered these things. So leaving that aside, the way our ego manipulates others is very conniving. It's very conniving. It's so conniving that it'll even fool you into thinking that you're a good person and you have nothing but good intentions and you're so angelic. But anyone else that questions your motives, they must be the devil. But because of course I'm a saint, I have done nothing wrong. So we in our plainness, in our simplicity, Eldora simply gave her an analysis. Hey, listen, you're not happy and you're going into this relationship. We're speaking to her from a soul level. What you are doing is not making any sense. It was an act of love.
It was an act of deep, unconditional
and
love.
And we wouldn't give this kind of advice to any stranger passing by on the street. Eldora mentioned it out of love because she was so close. She was one of her sisters. So you say this as a well-wisher only to people you care about. Like, hey, think about what you're doing. It doesn't add up. So instead of saying, wait a minute, instead of having that aha moment, she could have gone two ways. She could have had an awakening and said, oh my God, you're so right. Like, I need to wake up from this and like
exactly.
Find a guy who actually matches my vibration. Thank you, Eldora, right? But that would be the one way of dealing with it. But
that would be what a person who has done enough, who has enough awareness would do.
Yeah.
Like if someone told us, hey, you're like not seeing this blind spot, I would say, thank you. Like
I've seen this in us. I've seen this in Eldora
we're masters
a lot.
at this.
We're very self-effacing people. Eldora even more than I learned a lot from her in this regard. That she's so self-effacing that when I present to her one thing that makes sense and it's not based on ego, if I present to her, hey, this is your blind spot, you need to look at it, she just gets it. And I kind of like envy her in that way. I'm like, how do you get it so fast?
I get it, and I also watch my own blind spots like a hawk. I can see my blind spots, I can see his blind spots, he can see my blind spots.
Because when I go into my triggers, I'm still in the phase where my wounds are so deep, and this may be relatable to a lot of you, that the wound is so deep that even when somebody is telling you from outside, hey, this is what you need to look at, you're going to make them the bad person.
But you know why that is, baby?
Yeah.
It's because your wounds are, remember we said 80% of the time they come from childhood? His wounds are very recent. So yes, the wounds of ungratitude and constantly being spoken down to by his ex-wife for 15 years. He had a very, very abusive marriage.
Yeah, as early as like 7 years.
That's why it was so fresh. Which is why you couldn't see past it and then just be all hunky-dory. But it takes a level of mastery. And now you've gotten really good at it.
At least I'm able to see the wounds. At least I'm able to acknowledge that there's something to fix. So that's a very important step.
It's just about healing. There's just something. So back to this point, guys, look right past the trigger, get straight to the wound. So if let's talk about my case. In my case, let's say on my birthday, what would that look like? I'd look right past the trigger and say, hey, this is a wound from not being loved in my childhood. This is a wound from wanting love, wanting to feel special or to be made to feel special by someone else on my birthday. This was the only day that mattered to me in my childhood. And you know what? I can let that story go now. Because right now I'm bathing in love. The universe surrounds me with love everywhere I go. All I need to do is love myself. All I need to do is pull up that beautiful inner child who waited 363 days a year for her birthday, just because every morning I'd wake up in my birthday and I'd have butterflies in my stomach, because I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go down the stairs and my parents are gonna say happy birthday. And that was the only time they spoke to me with love. They weren't bad, I mean, they weren't trying to be mean, but they just didn't have love. And when you go and talk to that little inner child and say, my baby, you're with me now. That's the fourth step. I just made that up now.
Yeah, so
let's make that the fourth step.
Going deeper into step number 3 is go past your ego story and go deeper into the wound. Try to acknowledge the wound for the first time. And that is usually going to cause you the breakthrough. So the one thing, and we're going to write this down as a point here, the one thing to always remember is triggers are always about you. They are not about the other person.
Always.
Once you get that concept, it becomes a lot more simple because you know that you're being triggered. We've told you the markers, how to identify that you're being triggered. You know that there's a very enormous ego or a guard dog personality that's like coming in front of you and not letting anyone come in your space in that scenario. And it's very gnarly, it's very nasty. So you know that in that particular situation, if that's happening to you, you do want to isolate yourself and you do want to go inwards. You want to meditate, you want to go inwards, you want to go into a room and say, everybody, I need some space, I need some time to process. And then ask your higher self, I'm ready. Show me the wound. I'm dropping all of my ego stories in this moment and I'm ready to face the wound head on. And you are going to be shown it one way or another. And usually it's shown to you as an incident from your past. If it's from your recent past, go back further. You have to diagnose and ask yourself, when are all the times in my life that I felt unappreciated? Or when I felt disrespected, or whatever the particular situation that you're in, whatever you're feeling in that moment, ask your higher self to show you, when did this feeling first originate? Like one of my first feelings of being abandoned was when I was 6 and my mother was on the phone and I was sick and I was calling out to her from the upper floor. And no matter how loud I screamed, and it's etched in my soul, no matter how loud I screamed for her to come to my assistance, she just stayed on that phone call. So I felt she was abandoning me. And that wound of abandonment is still there with me at some level or another. So ask yourself, and you'll be shown a similar situation of when this first occurred in your particular lifetime. And triggers almost always, like we mentioned, 80% of the time they're going to be from your childhood. That's why your inner child always comes out when you're being triggered. It's your inner child wound that come out. So when you're lashing out at someone, you may be saying some very mean and harmful words, but what your inner child is almost always telling the other person is, I'm not being loved the way I deserve to be loved. It's always about not being loved. So you go into the wound and you start looking at the wound head on. And once you allow yourself to feel the wound, the magic's already happening. You're already doing the healing process, because shedding light on the wound is the healing. Feeling the wound is the healing. So why was this wound brought to your attention 20 years from the past, or 30 years or 40 years from the past? Why was it brought to your attention now? Because in the moment that the wound took birth, you did not have the emotional capacity to feel that wound, but now you do.
Yes.
So now bring your self-awareness and start to feel the wound. And as you literally place your hands, if a part of your body hurts, if your heart hurts, if your belly hurts, place your hands there and feel like close your eyes and you're breathing. And as you're breathing, feel like white light coming in through your crown. And as you're breathing out, breathe it out from the wound. So you're filtering and channeling God's source energy from your crown and into the wound and out from the wound. So this is a very cathartic process. And what happens is you're actually sending light into the dark aspects of your soul. And the light is actually regenerating those missing aspects of your soul. And all the fragments that you had left behind in your past are now coming back to you.
Step number 4, you heal the wound. This is the most beautiful integration part. How do you heal the wound? I'll give you an example of how I did it for my birthday. I brought up that beautiful inner child of mine that craved love, that craved validation, that craved acceptance, that craved one day of just being loved, I brought that girl up and I said, you know what, baby? You've got me now. I'm with you now. You're with me now. You're with me. It's almost like you're an older version holding your own inner child as a baby and giving her or him all the love that you didn't receive as a child. You hold your inner child and you say, we've got this. And how do you heal the wound? You lie in bed or you go in nature, you pull up your beautiful inner child and you literally look right at your inner child and you look at all the situations that caused that wound to even be put there. Lack of love, lack of, like in my case, it was always being talked down to. Like my parents would literally vocalize and verbalize to me all the time that we feel sorry for the man who will marry you. They said this to me all the time. We feel sorry. And not only that, when I got married, I ran away from home and whatnot. And later on when we met them, they would literally say to my ex-husband, oh my God, like, I don't know how you live with her, man. Like, I don't know. They always supported him. So all these wounds, you look right past the trigger and you look at the wound and you heal it by saying, like for me, what I had to do, and this is what healed it, it was so beautiful. This was 2 years ago. We were in Cuba or somewhere. We were somewhere.
Yeah, it was Cuba.
Cuba, right?
Yeah, I remember.
3 years ago. 3 years ago, I think, for my birthday. And you know what I did? I said, the same thing happened. I woke up 10 o'clock. He gives me this cute little card with this something he had bought me. And an intense reaction triggered within me. And that day, our guides literally said, take space apart. And he says, our guides are saying we need to spend time separately. And I'm like, you son of a bitch, it's my birthday. You want to be away from me? Like I'm throwing this tantrum and I don't want him to leave me. That's how triggers work. So he's like, baby, the guides are saying we need to be separate and we're going to honor it. Like he's very good at holding his boundaries. So we said, fine. I went to one side of the beach. He went to the other side of the beach. Like we couldn't even see each other. And that's when the healing took place. I called up my guides were helping me through it. I called up my beautiful inner child and said, you know what, baby? I have not given you enough love. I need to love myself. And that's when all of these wounds are not even needed. Who cares if he loves me or she loves me or they love me or they don't love me? It doesn't matter. Because love, think about it. What is human love? I've had so many people say, I love you, like all these friends, these soul sisters of mine that I reference as, you know, one of the examples. It was like, what is all this love about? Ultimately, it boils down to loving yourself unconditionally. If I didn't love myself unconditionally, I couldn't be making YouTube videos because you know how many judgments are thrown at us, you guys? Many of you watching love us unconditionally, the kind of, oh my God, like you guys are amazing. And I just want to give a shout out to Gagan. I know you guys are going to be thrilled and shocked right now. To Gagan, to Ski, and to Kitty. You guys are amazing. These are three beautiful souls, young souls. I mean, like they're in their 20s, I think, all of them. 2 are in India, 1 is in the US. There are admins for our Telegram chat. They volunteered to be admins to keep the page clean. This was 2 days ago. And until now, I've only seen you guys through the screen and then a few people who came to the retreat, right? These girls, literally, we created a little Telegram chat, me and the 3 of them. And the love that pours out for them towards me is such a pure vibration. I literally lay down in my bed last night and I'm thinking, holy shit, like all my life, the universe has only connected me with people who've reflected to me all my faults because I didn't love myself. You see how this works? I didn't love myself. So the universe kept reflecting to me people who couldn't love me because they couldn't see me for who I was because they didn't love themselves. That's a different story. Once you heal all of this, like I have, like Siman has, we're now attracting people who love us like we love each other. And I'll repeat that. Gagan, Ski, and Kitty, you guys made me emotional yesterday because someone actually commented on our Telegram chat saying, I don't know why I get triggered. Like there was this one day when Siman was talking, I wasn't triggered. And when Eldora started speaking, I got triggered. But I understand this is my trigger. Like I wonder what's in it. I wonder what's going on. And you know what? One of them, I don't know if it was Kitty or Ski, one of them replied to that person. And this is what caused such a beautiful aha moment for us. She said, trust me, my dear, when you heal your negative ego, when you heal all those negative voices telling you why you need to be triggered by her, you will just see an angel. And she said, comma, like literally. And that is a very deep thing to say, because when you clear your stuff, what she's saying is, then some of them, when they talk to me and talk to Siman, they see us as angels. For some of you, if you have woman wounds or if you have father wounds, Siman triggers a lot of father
wounds in people, and Eldora triggers mother wounds or other stuff.
And also remember, when someone is in their power, like we are master triggerers.
Yeah. So
and we do it out of our love.
Triggered by spiritual teachers. Just know that.
Yes.
Because that is our unconditional love to you. We're always going to show you what needs to be worked on. And we're not doing that consciously because we just love triggering people. It happens through you. So your higher self in your interactions with us is one way or another going to orchestrate a situation where you get triggered by us. And the students who succeed, the students who stay with us for the long run and go all the way with us, they're the ones who know that the spotlight's always on them, not us. The ones who fall off are the ones who say, hey, you guys are bad, you guys are evil, how dare you say this, or
how dare you swear,
or you eat meat, or you go to luxurious hotels, so you're bad. Sometimes their money blocks come up, sometimes their belief systems are challenged. So all of these things are triggers. But also tell them about how you took your younger inner child on a birthday.
Yeah, where?
Remember, because your birthday triggers were coming up, then you said, let's go bitches, and you picked them up in a Cadillac.
Yes. Thank you. I forgot. How do you remember all this?
I don't know.
He is amazing. Okay, so this is what I did. In that moment, I literally called all versions of my inner child, like literally 5 or 6, 3 versions. I remember 3 versions came up. And I said...
One of them was the one who was locked in a room, and one of them was your inner child from like 3 or 4 years old.
There was 3 different ages came up, wounded inner childs. And I said, let's go bitches. Like the queen is here.
Yeah, let's to explain the process.
I don't even remember.
To go back into the process, because we want you guys to do this at home when you're triggered, is first of all, go inwards and say, I want to look at the wound. That was step 3. Now, when you're looking at the wound, you want to heal the wound. And because the wound is usually originating from your childhood, you want to bring up that version of you that you have identified that first felt that intense emotion. So let's say if you're, in my example, when I was 6 and my mother didn't come to my rescue when I was yelling my lungs out, that was my inner child that had fragmented. So in Eldora's case, when she looked at her birthday wound, 3 of her inner children came out. One was when she was not loved as a child and she was 6, and one was her 16-year-old self that was locked in a room for,
I'm amazed that you remember
3
all
days.
This. Exactly.
And one was in her 20s, probably.
So sweet.
So then 3 versions of her came out.
Yes.
So what did you do? You said let's celebrate my birthday in style.
And you know what I said? And I took them out or something. I remember saying, I'm going to pick you up in a fucking Cadillac and we're going to go and stay in the best luxury hotel that money can buy. And I treated myself to something. And I said to them, this vacation is for us, the 4 of us, me and the 3 of you fragmented ones. And literally I would go for a pedicure and I would say, all right, I'm going for a pedicure with my 16-year-old inner child. I would go to a luxury hotel and spend $400 on a massage. And I would say, like, I did things. I said, you know what? You're with me now. We are going to spoil the living daylights out of each other. And you're with me now. No one, not even Siman. That was the breakthrough for me. I said, no one, not me, not even Siman is allowed to ever hurt you guys. And I promise you that from this day on, you are safe with me. I've got you.
Exactly.
And man, the healing was very powerful. It's liberated me. If I hadn't gone through all this healing and he hadn't, we could not make YouTube videos, guys. Think of how big that is. So in other words, another way to say the same thing is, if you guys have unhealed wounds, you're in a lower timeline because of it. Exactly. Because we healed our wounds, we're going up like a rocket ship, because now we can literally go into, like, we don't have any wounds with each other. Those are all our old stories. And baby, tell them how I used to take a lot of days in the story.
Yeah, so sometimes when we go, and this is all part of step 4, how to heal the wound. Sometimes when we go into the wound, what used to happen in my case was like I spent too much of the time attached to the story that the trigger that hurt me, I used to keep projecting energy outwards and say, thought I was doing the right thing by going and isolating myself in a room and meditating and processing the feelings. But instead of processing the feelings and asking myself, what was the root cause of the problem? I used to stay stuck in the egoic story that she caused it or he caused it, and I wasn't able to get past that point because I didn't know how the process works. But now I do, and we recently learned this because we're always like reverse engineering life, and that's a very powerful way to live. So when we reverse engineered it and we realized that all the core wounds are from our childhood, and we would recommend this for you guys as well, is the first step is go past the ego story and then look at the actual wound, feel which part of you, which inner child version of you first felt that way, first felt hurt or first felt abandoned, and then bring that inner child version of you in front of you and then talk to them. So talk to them like you're their well-wisher, you're their higher self, you're their unconditionally loving ascended master, and speak to them as a person who will just hold them and accept them unconditionally. So if the power of your imagination is very, very strong. So if you do this with diligence, I assure you that this is going to work and this is going to heal your wounds. So you bring up your inner child and you ask them to express themselves unconditionally without any borders, without any restrictions. You could even channel
Journal.
your inner child by journaling and writing down whatever comes in out from spontaneously on.
In fact, journaling is highly recommended.
It's highly recommended because what happens when you journal, you start automatic writing. The first few words may be from your mind, but then your fingers take a life of their own and you start channeling and you start accessing data banks and memory that you are not even consciously aware of. So you are able to channel subconscious fragments of your mind that have been repressed for years, and you'll be shocked that some of the pain that you carry that comes out is even there because you weren't consciously aware of it. A lot of these memories are locked up. So when you start channeling your inner child, you could do it with words, you could do it with journaling. When you allow your inner child to express their hurt, then you hold them and you say, now I've got you. Now nobody else can hurt you and you're with me. Would you like to merge with me? And you hug that inner child, and when they're ready, they will merge with you. So don't rush the process either. If it takes like a couple of times for you to do this process, that's fine. Don't rush the process because healing is not a destination. Healing is a journey. So you want to be patient with yourself and hold that inner child. And when the time is right and you ask that inner child to fully merge with your heart and dissolve into your light body, that's when you know the healing is complete. And you'll actually visualize this melting and merging process because I've experienced it, Eldora's experienced it. So in her experience, it was her inner children who were not given love on the birthday. The birthday was the only part when they received love.
And guys, the important thing is they don't always, like Siman said, they don't always forgive you and heal right away.
Yeah.
Like mine, they weren't ready to heal for like almost 6 months. I can't remember how long, but you don't have to rush it. You'll see psychically.
You just have to be persistent.
You'll see. And so let's say somebody says, I'm not ready to integrate and dissolve into you yet. Your inner child, you'll see when you look at your inner child through your psychic vision. Let's say they're not ready. They don't look completely healed. Like my inner child looked exhausted and just exhausted. She would sit up like on the stairs till 12 o'clock to run down and save her mother, let's say, if the parents got into a fight. So I always lived my life watching over my back or watching over my shoulders or always feeling unsafe. So my inner child wasn't just ready to leave when I said, hey, come on, let's go and splurge money on a massage, or let's go spend some time at the spa, or like you and I, let's spend time in a park or whatever it could be. It's a process. The way you do it is by constantly keeping your inner child in your aura. Yeah. This is how I did it. I'd always keep her around me and she would just be doing her own thing. Like my 16-year-old would just be doing her own thing. She would be healing as I'm going around my journey. So this is like a multi-dimensional healing, guys. So you're going around your life And at the same time, all these inner child versions, keep them close, keep them in your aura, and keep checking on them. And be aware of them all the time until they finally merge with you, as Siman said. I actually have a mantra I wrote down. When you speak as your higher self to your inner child, literally say, have empathy and say, I am willing to feel my pain. I am willing to see what I need to see to process this wound and let it pass through me. And once you do that, it starts to dissolve the emotional charge, and therefore it dissolves the wound.
Exactly. And what you'll notice is that the next time the same situation occurs that used to trigger you, it won't bug you as much. It may just bother you slightly, and then you realize, hey, I don't need to go there. I've already processed this. So it gets easier and easier, and that's when you know the healing process is working. So be patient with yourself and always look within, don't blame. Ask your higher self, and this takes a lot of courage, ask your higher self to be shown what the wound is. And when you identify the parts of your past where the wound originated, feel the pain and talk to your inner child, the version of you that was wounded, that was fragmented. It becomes a personality of its own. Speak to that inner child version of you and love them. And this is the one thing that always stays constant. It's always about lack of love. It's always about wounds from our past when we were not loved. And another simple exercise we like to do is when we're meditating, there's no triggers, nothing. But we're meditating, we just place our hands on our own hearts and we just send light into ourselves.
We do this every day, you guys.
Love and light into our own hearts. And in the beginning, our hearts feel like there's a void or there's something missing inside. Because in the beginning of your spiritual journey, most people, I'm not saying everyone, but most people have a lot of missing pieces of their soul because they have not been loved. So this exercise works very powerfully. Keep filling yourself up with your own love, and eventually you'll feel a state of bliss. You'll feel this bliss take over you, and that's when you know your love is really overpouring out of you.
It's erupting out of you.
So this is a very powerful exercise in self-love.
I am so glad we made this triggers video.
Same. This is
so
the real
amazing.
work, guys. Take this seriously and you're gonna fly.
You are going to fly. I am so excited. So one of the things that we did was we embedded this whole transmission with crystalline diamond frequencies. And what that does, we actually have some of our sacred tools right here. You know what that does, you guys? It brings you up to diamond frequencies real quick by very gently exposing all your shit, all your triggers, all your wounds, all your limiting belief systems, whatever is the case. It starts giving you all of this it brings it right up to the surface, because guess what? Now you have the tools. There's no more excuses. You have the tools to heal this and free yourselves from their clutches once and for all, and you're ready to fly. You're ready to take off like a rocket ship.
And another very good affirmation to remember is to ask your higher self to show you all your wounds and triggers gently, not in a way that shocks your system. So if you ask your higher self, say, higher self, please reveal all my blind spots, all my wounds, all my triggers in a way that's easy for me to process and in a way that does not cause a violent emotional outburst. So even that works. Your higher self will go easy on you.
Before we wrap up, there's just one thing I want to make sure you guys got. Siman mentioned it actually 2 or 3 times. He said when you're in a state, when you're feeling pain, like when you go through the trigger and you go to the wound, it sometimes feels unbearably painful because all of that wound, hurt, sadness, pain, it's the worst feeling in the world when the wounds are big. Remember, when you put yourself in a safe space and you say, I'm going to feel it, you just put your hands on your heart and all of that icky stuff, painful stuff comes up, and you just be brave and you feel it. But guess what? This is the miracle. When you feel the wound, when you feel it, even 15-20 minutes a day, when you feel it, guess what? It leaves you. It heals, it processes, and it's gone once and for all. One day there'll be no emotional charge left. You'll say, all right, let me go feel that pain. And you'll be like, okay, there's no pain. It's easy.
Yeah.
And you've healed it.
And it really helps when you have someone who truly loves you, hold space for you. The last time I was feeling my wound, I remember that Eldora came in the room so lovingly. And although in that moment I was blaming her for the situation, she just unconditionally held space and she did not react to my ego triggers. She just said, I'm simply here to send you love. And that melted my heart. I'm like, oh my God, that shattered my story. So I'm lucky that I have her, but if you guys don't have someone who makes you feel safe, then you need to get away from that situation and allow yourself, go to a park, like, or go in a place where you're alone and away from that energy. You cannot do this in a volatile situation where someone is being abusive to you and they're in the next room. You're not
Even if you have
safe.
to just sit in your car and drive somewhere and sit in your car for 8 hours,
go to the park,
do it. Don't be in front of someone who's gonna like keep, you know, and it's very important. That's a very good point. When you're, and one more thing, if someone in front of you is triggered, so let's say Siman said when he was triggered, I went in the room and I just sat there in love, in unconditional love, and that force of unconditional love was so so strong, that it just dissolved the wound. That was the most powerful.
That's what did it for me, because I'm
healing.
like, I'm blaming this angel, like she's giving me nothing but loves. Then I realize it's my ego story that's holding me there. That allowed me for the first time to go past my ego and realize, that was my aha moment, that I realized it's not the story, it's me. I just need to remember that I have wounds to heal, and everybody does, and it's normal.
So if someone is triggered in front of you, please don't coach them, don't lecture them. Like in his trigger, if I went and said, oh baby, you're triggered, he would walk out of the house, trust me.
Just give them love.
You just give them love and you say, I understand. I totally understand. Because remember, you know what triggers are now. The people in your life don't. So it's very important to understand that and have empathy when someone else is going through their triggers. That doesn't mean you have to allow them to throw their shit on you and be rude to you and talk down to you. Absolutely not. But at least distance yourself from them and say, hey, until you get over this, I'm here, I've got your back, I love you, but I cannot be in your abusive energy right now. So you have boundaries too. I'm so glad we made this video. This is amazing. And again, just to wrap up on what I was saying, I don't know if I completed my thought on Gagan, Kirti and Ski, because this is so beautiful. It's so important to me, is once I healed myself, I said to Siman, I said, look at how these angels see us. They just see us as angels. And why is that? Because they have done enough of their own healing that finally, and we've done enough of our healing, that finally we're in an energetic vibrational match to those who see nothing but love. And one more thing, guys, that's channeling right now, I can guarantee you, use us as mirror boards. What's that word? Reflector boards or whatever. Because I can vouch for the fact, I can say it with full integrity, that Siman and I are not in our ego. We are in our unconditional love right now. We're not in our ego.
That's our only motivation for making any video.
So when we trigger you, like, you know, sometimes people trigger you and you don't really know if they love you or not, or they're trying to trigger you, or they're in their ego. They cannot be your teachers as well as someone who's not in their ego can be. We are not in our ego. I can guarantee that. So if you're triggered by us, use that as a very quick trampoline to say, oh my God, I'm triggered by these two, and they're not even in their ego. So I know I have work to do. So instead of like blaming us, or use us as your biggest trampoline and say, oh my God, and we've got each other's back, you guys. Just because somebody was triggered by me at the retreat, or someone was triggered by him, or he was triggered by me, I was triggered by him, these are all human things.
All stories.
We don't hold on to any blame. This is what unconditional love is. In our unconditional love, we're giving you the opportunity to get triggered, and we will say, you're welcome. Literally, that's how I feel. We'll say you're welcome, because I'm not here to be your best friend. I am not here to please you. I'm not here to be accepted by you. I'm here to trigger. I don't want to say that. I'm not here to trigger you.
We're not here to trigger you, but it just happens as part of the process. Correct. Because that's what you are creating in your experience.
You need
so
us
we're not even
to
triggering
reflect.
You. You're triggering you.
Yes, we're not doing it. We're just being ourselves, happy. You know, we want to teach you guys. We want to give you all the tips we've learned. But if you're getting triggered, own it. Go past it, heal the wound, spend time with your inner child, and get ready to fly.
Having said that, we love you guys. Until next time.
Bye, you guys. Love you.